Well, without taking a position one way or the other, I would just say the culmination of the campaign would be a great start. There would be a reduction of so much uncertainty as to the direction of the country, and there's so much cash on the sideline waiting to be invested or put to good use in one way or the other, that until we reduce that uncertainty as to who is the next Commander-in-Chief, head of the executive branch, as well as the direction of the Congress, whether it's going to be unified or more partisanship as usual to a certain extent, then I think you're going to see that cash stay on the side.
I think it's going to take a while. I think it's going to take longer than a year or two. A lot of people felt like that with the kind of recession we had, that there would be a steep climb out of it, and I don't think we're seeing that. I think a lot of that has to do with housing and other sectors, but I believe that we're going to see slower growth continue into the future, and I think there will be that growth. Although there are some groups like polled CPAs tend to be pessimistic about the economic outlook for the next year or two, but I think there will be slow growth, but I do believe it's going to take a number of years for us to climb back to anywhere near the levels of prosperity that we enjoyed 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, I'm not so necessarily positive about it. Basically, it's the printing of money by the Federal Reserve in order to help stimulate growth. It's going to increase the money supply here in the United States regarding the dollar, and will bring down the value of the dollar and potentially create inflation, if not hyperinflation, in the future, thereby reducing true buying power for the consumer. And so it may be a short-term solution to an entrenched structural long-term problem, and I think we go that way at our peril.
My concern, I think the concern of everyone, is that this is the first time we've done it in an open-ended fashion. It's occurring to the tune of about $40 billion a month, and there's some now that are calling for some limits. In particular, 2.5% inflation or 5.5% unemployment. They propose that it ought to be ceased at that point when either of those two targets are reached. So it's a little different this time because it's open-ended, and it's a little different because Bernanke and the Federal Reserve has taken the stance that this ought to be done specifically to bolster employment opportunities and to the extent that inflation doesn't run amok.
Well, healthcare is a major part of the economy, with us looking at now around 17% of the gross domestic product is being spent on healthcare. 17 cents out of every person's dollar in the United States is going toward something to do with their healthcare. That's a major issue, and when you look at jobs growth, there are plenty of jobs out there in healthcare. They may not all be right where we are, but throughout the United States, there is a tremendous need for all sectors in the healthcare field, both clinical, hands-on, as well as the management area, which is my area. With the economic driving, basically economic driving the healthcare market and the impact of healthcare on the economy itself, what we have is a lot of different players who have a lot to do with it. You have your insurance companies, and I was just reading today where they're looking at the cost of insurance to employers who provide insurance going up 4.6%. And the insurance companies are saying, well, that's because hospitals and physicians are charging more. Maybe, maybe not. I think the insurance companies also want a little bit bigger pocket because their customers are basically their stockholders, and so they're trying to feed that market. So we have a lot of things playing into the cost of health care. That's what's driving it. As long as we continue to be an unhealthy nation where our health care is being spent on disease management, we're going to continue to have high healthcare cost and a continuing need for healthcare professionals to take care of our unhealthy lifestyles. That is a major part of it. Research has shown that healthy employees are more productive, they cost the company less, they don't stay out of work as much for health care, and their health care costs are less. So the more that we promote a healthy lifestyle with our employees, the lower our health care costs are as a company and as a nation. So that is one of the major things we need to look at, even to reduce health care costs, is healthier lifestyles all around, healthier eating, more exercise, those kinds of things.
I think that is quite important, but you first have to not just get to the city and county, but you have to get into the state itself. Yeah. North Carolina right now is currently one of the highest tax as far as businesses go, states, if not the highest tax state in the Southeast. And so there has to be some type, I think, of restructuring of the tax model for businesses coming into North Carolina. And then once in North Carolina, then as far as incentives, whether a county or a city can then be looked at on that basis.
I think it's important to have a good workforce, and I think we have a great workforce. And so I'm optimistic about being able to bring businesses to the area, but we have to appreciate that companies are just customers for municipalities, that we have to find that we're able to be reasonably competitive in some way, and that's through the tax code and also through education of the workforce and having a good quality workforce to make available. And so I believe that we will do well in the long run, but yeah, I believe we do need to pay attention to particular incentives, and we need to put together packages that are attractive enough to attract businesses to our area.
I agree, and when we're looking at those packages, it doesn't just need to be the county or the city providing them, but companies within that area, just like Gardner-Webb offers the tuition assistance and those kinds of things. If various companies offered incentives to bring more industry in, our infrastructure is very important to attracting new industry. And if, for instance, go back to my health care, if we have a quality health care system and it can improve its quality, it is more attractive to those coming to the area. If we can show that our schools are quality schools for the people's children who are coming into our area. So those infrastructure things are very important.
Something that's interesting, I think, that has been recently in the news has to do with some comments that were made by Robert Gates, previous Secretary of Defense, about sequestration and the deadlock that Congress finds itself in. And we might have wonderful ideas either associated with the Republican or Democratic Party, but if we can't get those things done, if there is no negotiation and there is no compromise, then there's no action taken. And so Gates went as far as to say that it was a national security issue because we need to get our financial house in order to make sure that the long-range plans of the military are well organized. And so I think it's a concern, and I really wish there was some way that we could cause there to be some incentives laid before Congress to have them work together in a more productive way.
Well, it kind of reminds me when Reagan and Tip O'Neill, who was a Democrat Speaker of the House, would get together at the end of the day to share a little bit of friendship. Mm-hmm. They were able to work, from both sides of the aisle, if you will. Mm-hmm. And you saw that to a certain extent with Simpson Bowles, that Alan Simpson being a Wyoming kind of a curmudgeon senator, and Erskine Bowles being an old line Democrat here in North Carolina, were able to come together with the committee and put together, you may not agree with everything they proposed, but they put together a sensible package that unfortunately wasn't embraced by both parties. in order to do something regarding our debt. And I think our debt and the deficit is going to be the drivers holding us down until we're able to get a hold on that issue. Then, as you said, it's going to take some time before we come back from what we've been experiencing.